When my own children laughed at me at my Thanksgiving table, I did what I have done my whole life as a father. I kept passing the food, kept my voice steady, and pretended not to hear. But I heard every word. The house smelled of turkey and dressing, collard greens, and sweet potatoes. That old ceiling fan above the dining room hummed, and the good plates Denise bought on clearance years ago were lined up in front of people who used to fit around that table as kids. Now they were grown, dressed sharp, phones face down but never far. Marcus had claimed the seat at the head of the table without even thinking. Years ago, that had been mine. I let it go. I sat at the side, closest to the kitchen, where I could get up first if anyone needed anything. Old habits from when they were small. "Daddy, you don't have to get up," Tanya said at one point, when I stood up to refill the cornbread basket. She said "Daddy," but there was a little smile on her face, and her friend at the end of the table caught that smile and held it. "It's all right," I answered, setting fresh bread down in front of them. "I know my way around this kitchen." Jerome chuckled and leaned back in his chair, toothpick already in his mouth. "That's all he knows now, y'all. Kitchen and that old bus route in his head. World done moved on." The table laughed. Not loud at first. Just a wave of chuckles, eyes looking everywhere except at me. One of Marcus's coworkers, a young man in a tight blazer, tried to smooth it over. "Mr. Mason, Marcus tells us you used to drive all over the city. That's a serious job." "Used to," Marcus added, digging into the turkey. "Now he just argues with the TV and stacks those old newspapers. Old-fashioned, stubborn as ever." He took a sip of wine. Retirement hit him, and he never upgraded. "Don't say that," Tanya said, but she was laughing too. "He's not stubborn. He's just stuck. He still writes bills in a notebook. No apps, no online banking, nothing. If we left it to him, he'd hide cash in the mattress and wait for the mailman to bring his future." Jerome slapped the table. "Man, you know what he is?" He pointed his fork in my direction, not even looking at me. "He's a walking inheritance. Whole man built from Social Security and a paid-off house." The room broke into bigger laughter this time. A few people looked down, uneasy, but nobody said anything to stop it. Phones were already out again, someone filming the fun moment. My children, my blood, sitting under my roof, eating my food, turning me into a punchline. I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger, not rage. Just a deep, steady sadness that settled itself in a place that used to be pride. I picked up my glass of water, took a slow drink, and forced my hand not to shake. "Anybody need more gravy?" I asked. My voice did not crack. My smile stayed small and polite. I stood up, reached for the gravy boat, and walked around that table, serving every last one of them. They thought my silence meant I was weak. They had no idea it was the last Thanksgiving I would ever host with my will still carrying their names. When the house finally quieted down after Thanksgiving, I found myself standing alone in the doorway, watching the tail lights of my children's cars disappear down the street. I didn't wave. They didn't look back. The porch light flickered once, a bulb I kept meaning to change, and the cold air drifted in around my ankles. I closed the door behind me and let the silence settle. Silence has a sound to it when you've lived long enough. It isn't empty. It remembers things. My house isn't big by modern standards. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, narrow kitchen, old brick siding. But it holds nearly 40 years of me inside it. Denise used to say the walls remembered laughter the same way they remembered arguments. And that woman was right about everything, even the things I didn't want her to be right about. I walked into the kitchen and saw the mess still on the counters, the empty pans, the gravy spoon resting where I set it, crumbs scattered like somebody had tried to rush out of here faster than they arrived. I knew my kids wouldn't stay long after dinner. They never did anymore. Holidays were pit stops, performances for their own friends, opportunities to take a few pictures with the old man for social media. But I cleaned quietly. Washing dishes one by one. Wiping the same counters I'd wiped after every Thanksgiving going back to the early 90s. finding comfort in the routine. By the time everything was put away, it was almost midnight. I pulled out the chair at the kitchen table, the one Denise always claimed, and sat for a while, rubbing my hands together to get the dishwater chill out of my fingers. My life these days is simple. Not empty, just simple. Most mornings I wake before sunrise. Not because I need to, but because my body still believes it has another bus route to drive. Old habits don't retire even when you do. I sit on the edge of my bed, stretch my back, and thank God for another day. Denise used to put her hand on my chest during prayer time. Sometimes I still feel that phantom pressure. After that I shuffle to the kitchen, turn on the electric kettle, and make the same cup of coffee I've had for years, black, 2 spoons of sugar. I sit by the window and look out at the street. It's quiet at 6 a.m. in this neighborhood. Folks my age are already awake, the younger families are still asleep. Once the caffeine settles, I take a slow walk down to the corner store. The owner, Mr. Khan, has known me for decades. We talk about simple things, weather, sports, the price of eggs. He always asks about my kids, not because he's nosy, but because he remembers when they used to come in with me holding my pant leg, begging for candy. I tell him they're busy. That's the truth, even if it isn't all of it. Church is a big part of my life now. Not because I'm trying to be holy, but because it gives structure to the days. I sing bass in the choir. Not well, mind you, but with heart. The congregation is small, but the love feels big there. People ask how I'm doing and wait for an honest answer. Older folks see me. Younger folks respect me. Funny how strangers can treat you better than your own blood sometimes. When I get home in the afternoons, I usually tend to the yard, trim the hedges, rake leaves, sweep the walkway. Nothing fancy. Just maintenance. It's the kind of work that reminds you that things last when you care for them. My house survived storms, leaks, break-ins, and one kitchen fire because I tended to it little by little. You don't keep a home for nearly 40 years by accident. Inside, the walls carry memories. There's the mark on the doorframe from when Marcus finally hit his growth spurt. We wrote his height there in pencil. He begged me not to erase it. Tanya's artwork still hangs in the hallway. She drew a portrait of me once, all crooked lines and a smile too wide, and said it was her daddy, the hero. Jerome's toy cars are in a box in the closet, the ones he used to line up perfectly on the living room rug while asking me to drive them with him. I kept everything. They forgot almost all of it. These days, they call when they need something, money, a favor, a letter, a signature. They rarely ask how I'm feeling. They don't notice that I limp a little more when the rains come. They don't see that the medicine bottles on my dresser are multiplying. They don't ask what it's like waking up alone after 38 years of marriage. Denise passed 12 years ago, but I still talk to her like she never left. Especially at night. Sometimes I sit on the side of the bed and say, "You'd tell me what to do, wouldn't you?" And in that empty room, with the moonlight coming through the blinds, it feels like she answers. Not with words, but with clarity. The way only a woman you loved most of your life can answer without speaking. My brother, God rest his soul, used to tell me that the measure of a man is in how his children remember him, not how they treat him when they need something. But he also used to say some children grow up crooked because the world bends them when you're not looking. His grandkids, Caleb and Nia, visit more than my own kids. Not for money. Not for favors. Just to check on me. They mow the lawn without me asking. They bring groceries when they get extra from their mother. They sit with me and ask about the routes I used to drive, the people I met, the things I saw during my years behind the wheel. They listen. That's all a man really wants near the end of his life, someone who listens long enough to understand him. On the Sunday before Thanksgiving, Nia brought me a pecan pie she baked herself. She said, "Uncle Harold, you think your kid's coming over this year?" I said, "I believe so." She nodded, but her eyes said she already knew how it would go. Back in the present, after Thanksgiving night and the laughter at my expense, I sat in my quiet kitchen, letting the memories drift across the years. I could feel something shifting inside of me. A line being drawn. Not out of anger. Not out of revenge. But out of something deeper. Truth. The truth that I had raised 3 adults who saw me more as an obstacle than a father. The truth that respect wasn't coming back, no matter how much of myself I gave. The truth that love without gratitude turns into duty, then into impatience, then into resentment. But the hardest truth was this. I could keep giving everything to my children. Or I could stop pretending they deserved it. The next morning, before the sun even rose, I poured myself a cup of coffee, grabbed my old notebook from the drawer, and opened it to a page with a business card taped to the top. Attorney Willis. A man who handled my papers with more respect than my own children showed me in years. I stared at that card, my finger pressed against the tape to feel the edge. That's when I realized what I had to do. Not to punish, but to protect what mattered. Even if what mattered wasn't the people I once believed it would be. The first signs didn't come all at once. They rarely do. Betrayal doesn't hit you like a hammer. It starts like a draft slipping under the door, small, cold, and easy to ignore until one day you realize the whole room's been freezing for years. My first clue came back in early October, long before Thanksgiving. I was drinking my morning coffee, the sun barely lifting above the trees, when my phone buzzed on the table. I recognized Marcus's name. My kids rarely called that early unless something was wrong. I picked up. "Morning, son." "Hey, Dad," he said, voice quick, like he had somewhere to be. "Listen, I need to ask you about something." I waited. With Marcus, pauses always mean calculation. "You ever update your will?" he asked. Just like that. No greeting. No how you feeling. No you got time to talk? I leaned back in my chair. "It's handled, far as I remember." "Why?" "No reason," he said too fast. "Just making sure things are, in order. Don't want anything stuck in probate." Probate. My son barely visited, but he knew probate law. I didn't say much. I just let him talk. He mentioned something about how houses get complicated and how it'd be easier if we were all on the same page. At the time, it sounded like concern. A little misplaced, maybe, but still concern. But when he hung up, barely giving me time to say goodbye, I felt something sit uneasy in my stomach. The next clue came a week later, but this time from Tanya. She FaceTimed me while she was getting her makeup done at some boutique. People were talking in the background, music playing, hair dryers blowing. She barely looked at the screen. "Daddy, quick question," she said, squinting like she had a deadline. "Your house is, what, 3 bedrooms?" "3, I said slowly. "And the lot size?" "You remember?" "Tanya," I said, "why are you asking?" "It's nothing serious," she answered, waving a hand. "My friend's thinking about getting into real estate and wanted examples of older homes. I told her yours is like, vintage. Cute. Like a starter project. Cute. Starter project. This house that held her from birth until her wedding day. This house Denise and I patched, painted, and prayed over." I didn't respond. Sometimes silence says more than a speech. Before she hung up, she added one last thing, casual, careless. "Once you're gone, we'll probably remodel everything anyway. Modernize it. Make it open concept. No offense." Then she blew a kiss, not even looking at the camera, and ended the call. The next clue came from Jerome. He didn't call. He just showed up. Middle of a Tuesday, wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, smelling like someone else's cologne. I heard the knock and opened the door to him leaning against the frame like he grew up in that very spot. "Hey Pops," he said. "Got any food?" I heated leftovers. Fried chicken from Sunday. Cornbread. He ate like he hadn't eaten in days. I watched him, remembering when he was small, when he used to sit at this same table swinging his legs because they couldn't reach the floor. After he finished, he wiped his mouth and looked around the living room. You ever think about downsizing, Dad? He asked. This place too big for you now? I shook my head. I'm comfortable right where I am. He nodded slowly, eyes moving from the couch to the television to the hallway, like he was assessing inventory. Then he said something that sounded like a joke, but wasn't. Well, don't get too comfortable. You can't take all this with you. I don't remember if I responded. I think I just let the words hang there, caught somewhere between disrespect and ignorance. When he left, I stood in the doorway, watching him walk down the path, hands in pockets, shoulders slouched. He didn't look back. He rarely did. After that, the clues kept coming. At church one Sunday, Sister Gwen pulled me aside. She's the type who notices everything but pretends not to. She said, "Brother Harold, I saw your boy Marcus the other day at the bank. He was talking mighty confident about upcoming changes in the family. You all right?" I told her I was fine. But it stayed with me quietly. Another time, I went to get my prescription filled, and the pharmacist's assistant, young, friendly, said, "Your daughter was in here. Asked what medications you on and how often you refill them. Said she was helping with your future planning." Future planning. My daughter asking about my pills for future planning. I didn't get upset. I didn't confront anybody. I just paid attention. Sometimes the smallest gestures reveal the biggest truths. November rolled in, early cold settling into the bones, and the trees shedding leaves like they were tired of holding them. I spent most days raking, sweeping, keeping the yard clean. I liked the work. It kept my hands busy when my mind felt too crowded. One afternoon, while I was outside, Caleb came by on his bike. He braked at the curb, breath showing in the air. "Uncle Harold," he said, "need help with the leaves?" I nodded. He grabbed a rake from the shed without asking. We worked side by side in quiet rhythm. I didn't tell him anything about the clues I'd been seeing. Didn't have to. He treated me with respect because something in his heart told him it was right, not because of anything I had. As we worked, he said, "Nia asked if you're coming to her choir recital next week." "I'll be there," I said. He smiled, real smile, not the forced one my own children gave me when they remembered to visit. After he left, I sat on the porch and looked out at the yard. Something settled in my chest. A clarity I hadn't wanted, but couldn't avoid. When my children talked to me, there was a transaction hidden behind every word. When Caleb and Nia talked, there was only regard. That difference became impossible to ignore. By the week before Thanksgiving, I noticed every new comment, every offhand remark from my kids. They talked about me being slower, about keeping an eye on my paperwork, about making things easier when the time comes. But none of them asked how I felt. None of them asked what I wanted. They didn't check if I was lonely, or if I needed help with groceries, or if the house was getting too heavy to maintain. I wasn't their father anymore. I was a future asset. A possibility. A number waiting to be collected. And once you see that kind of shift, once you realize your own children are looking at you like inventory, you can't unsee it. By the time Thanksgiving came around, the clues had formed a clear picture. A picture of children who loved the idea of me, but not the reality of who I was. A picture of entitlement wearing the clothes of family. So when they laughed at me at my own table, mocked my age, my habits, my entire way of living, I didn't react in shock. No. I recognized it. I'd been watching it grow for months. I just didn't want to believe what it meant. Sometimes the truth doesn't show up all at once. Sometimes it walks toward you slowly, step by step, until it stands in your doorway with no place left to hide. And by then, it's already inside your house. The moment the truth finally revealed itself didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, like most painful things do. It came through a phone call I wasn't meant to hear, and a message I wasn't meant to read. It was the night before Thanksgiving. I had driven to the church for choir rehearsal. My voice isn't good, but I show up. That's something Denise taught me: participate in the world while you're still in it. The choir was already inside warming up when I pulled into the parking lot. The sun had just dipped, and the light poles were coming on one by one, glowing like tired sentries. I stepped out of my car, breathing in the chilly air. I reached for my coat collar when I heard a voice near the side of the building. Not loud, not panicked, just careless. I would have ignored it until I recognized the voice. Marcus. He stood with his back to me, leaning on the brick wall, talking on the phone. His hands were animated the way they get when he's feeling bold. I froze by instinct, not wanting to eavesdrop, but something in his tone felt wrong. Man, I told you, he said, exasperated. Thanksgiving is basically the annual inspection of the goods. I blinked. Inspection? He laughed. Yeah. Don't worry. The old man's fine. Just stuck in his routines. Barely goes anywhere. We just gotta keep him comfortable until he signs everything over. My chest tightened. It felt like a fist closing slowly. He continued, voice sharper, look, between the house, the pension leftovers, and whatever he got saved up, it's a decent payout. Better than waiting until he's 99 still watering that ugly lawn. My son. Talking about me like I wasn't a person, just a payout waiting to clear. Another voice on the phone must have asked something because Marcus replied, no, he won't last that long. You haven't seen him. He's slowing down big time. We just need him to finalize the last paperwork. We already talked about who's taking what. I stepped back into the shadow of the building before he could turn around. My hand was gripping the side of my coat so tight my fingers ached. He wasn't worried about me being sick or struggling. He was worried about me being too healthy for too long. He ended the call with a light laugh, my own laugh, twisted, and walked toward the parking lot. I stayed behind the corner of the building until I heard his engine start and fade away. Inside the church, the choir was humming through a warm-up. I walked in quietly and took my seat on the last row, but my voice was gone. My breath felt thin. My chest felt heavy. I kept replaying his words in my head like they were carved there. Annual inspection of the goods. Keep him comfortable until he signs everything over. Decent payout. I didn't sing that night. I just held the sheet music and stared at the notes I had sung for years. The director asked if I was feeling all right. I said I was just tired. That wasn't a lie. I've never known a tired like that before. When rehearsal ended, a few folks asked if I wanted to get dinner with them at Waffle House. I told them another time. I drove home slowly, letting every stoplight be a moment to breathe. But the night wasn't done with me. When I got home, the house was dark except for the lamp in the living room. I hung up my coat, walked into the kitchen, and saw something on the table that didn't belong. My phone. Except it wasn't mine. It was Tanya's. She must have left it after dropping off pie earlier. She always rushes out, always juggling something, always distracted. I picked up her phone, opened her contacts to find her number so I could call her from my own phone. But when I pressed the home button, it didn't ask for a password. It unlocked. A small mistake, probably one she didn't notice. A notification banner slid down the screen. Group chat, future planning. And beneath it, the start of a sentence. Y'all think he even knows how wills. I didn't mean to open it. But my thumb moved before my mind caught up. And suddenly the whole conversation was in front of me. Marcus, we need to remind him again to go to the lawyer. He's moving slow. Tanya, relax, he'll do it. He always does what we suggest. Jerome, if he doesn't hurry, someone's gonna snatch that house from under us. I checked Zillow. The place worth more than I thought. Marcus, told you. And once Dad's gone, we can sell it, split the profit, and invest. No more money problems. Tanya sent a laughing emoji. Then, just gotta wait for him to finish living. Jerome, low-key, can we convince him to move to a senior apartment sooner? He'd be safer there anyway. And it frees up the house. Marcus, he won't go unless we push. That man is stubborn as a mule. Tanya, he's sweet, but outdated. He doesn't need all that space. Jerome, plus, y'all saw the meds on his dresser last time? He ain't gonna be around forever. Marcus, exactly. Keep calm. Be patient. Just make sure he doesn't change the paperwork at the last minute. Tanya, he won't. He loves us too much for that. Then she added something that knocked the air from my lungs. It's his job to take care of us. It's the least he can do after everything we had to deal with growing up. Everything they had to deal with? I scrolled. Marcus, true. He wasn't perfect. Tanya, no parent is. But we earned that inheritance. Jerome, exactly. We're owed. Owed. That word hit different. Like they weren't my children. Just creditors waiting for a due date. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, Tanya's phone still warm in my hand. The refrigerator hummed. The house creaked. My heartbeat echoed in my ears. All the clues over the last month suddenly lined up. Every joke. Every comment. Every slip of disrespect. It all pointed in one direction. They weren't planning to support me. They were planning to harvest me. And the worst part wasn't their greed. It was their certainty. That I would give them everything simply because they believed they deserved it. I don't know how long I sat there. Minutes. Hours. Time loses shape when your heart cracks quiet. When I finally stood, I placed Tanya's phone on the counter. My hands were steady now. Not shaking. Not trembling. Just steady in a way that came from some deep place inside me that had woken up. I walked to my bedroom, turned on the lamp, and opened the drawer where I kept my notebook. The notebook with my late wife's handwriting on the front page. The notebook I wrote bills in, prayers in, thoughts in. I slipped into bed but didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the old house breathe around me. Denise used to put her hand on my chest during moments like this. But that night, I put my own hand there and whispered. They don't see me anymore. Truth doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes through a phone you weren't meant to open. Sometimes it comes through the voice of your firstborn, talking like you're an old machine waiting to be scrapped. And sometimes it comes because your heart is tired of pretending. The next morning was Thanksgiving. The day they would laugh at me openly. The day strangers would watch them treat me like a burden in my own home. And when it happened, when the laughter circled the table like a storm, I didn't feel surprise. I felt confirmation. Confirmation of what I had already discovered the night before. Confirmation that whatever love they once had turned into expectation, entitlement, and calculation. I served them gravy. I passed them bread. I smiled politely. Because I knew something they didn't. That night had changed everything. And by the time the next morning came, their names would no longer be tied to a single thing I owned. The morning after Thanksgiving felt colder than usual. Not weather cold, something else. A kind of stillness that settles inside a man when he's finally done hoping other people will change. I woke before sunrise, same as always. My body knows that hour even without an alarm. I sat on the edge of the bed for a long while, hands resting on my knees, looking at the quiet room Denise and I once shared. The moonlight slipping past the blinds gave the walls a soft glow. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I didn't replay what happened the night before. I just sat there with a single truth. My children had stopped seeing me as their father a long time ago. I'd just been too stubborn to accept it. When the first hint of sunlight spread across the carpet, I stood up, put on a pressed shirt, slacks, and the dark jacket Denise always said made me look put together, and walked to the kitchen without turning on a light. I made my coffee slowly with black, 2 spoonfuls of sugar. I let the kettle whistle a little longer than usual, just to hear something living in that quiet house. The old notebook sat on the table where I left it. I opened it with the same care I used to open report cards and medical bills years ago. Inside the front pocket was a business card. Attorney Michael Willis, Estate and Family Planning. I'd known the man for decades. He handled my pension rollover, helped with Denise's paperwork when she passed, and checked in on me every Christmas without fail. I pressed a finger to his name and felt something firm settle in my chest. Not anger. Not spite. Just a decision. I finished my coffee, washed the mug, grabbed my jacket, and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the neighborhood still asleep. I walked past the hedges I trimmed myself, down the cracked walkway, and stood at the bus stop. Some people would have driven. But I didn't want to. I wanted to take the route that had carried me through so many years. I boarded the bus and nodded to the young driver. He nodded back, not recognizing me as a man who once sat in that same seat with the city waking up around him. The ride downtown was quiet. No chatter, no noise, just the sound of the engine humming and the occasional shuffle of feet as people got on and off. I stared out the window, watching the world move by with the same steady patience that kept me alive all these years. When I stepped off at Peachtree Street, the sun was finally breaking through. I walked 3 blocks to Willis's office, a modest building sandwiched between a dentist's office and an accounting firm. I took the stairs. Not out of pride. Just out of habit. The receptionist, a woman with bright braids and a warm smile, looked up when I entered. "Good morning, Mr. Mason," she said. "Attorney Willis is expecting you." He didn't know why I was coming, but he always made room for me. That alone told me the kind of man he was. Inside his office, Willis stood when I walked in. "Harold," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "You all right? You sounded quiet on the phone." I sat down across from him. The leather chair creaked under my weight. I placed my notebook on the table and opened it, not to the pages with bills or grocery lists, but to the page where I'd written something months ago. When the time comes, make sure what I leave behind goes to the right hands. I pushed the notebook toward him. "Michael," I said, my voice steady, "I need to update everything." He didn't rush. He never did. He slid his glasses up his nose and folded his hands. "Tell me what's on your mind." It took me a moment to find the right place to start. I wasn't trying to unload feelings or seek advice. I just needed to state the facts. "My kids," I said quietly, "don't see me anymore. Not who I am. Not what I tried to be." He didn't interrupt. He let the silence sit. They were talking, planning, counting. I continued. "Not about my health. Not about my life. About what they think they're owed." Still, he listened. "They don't visit unless they need something. They don't call unless there's a problem I'm supposed to fix." "But Michael, what really showed me the truth," I paused, steadying my breath. "They talk about my house like it's a prize on a game show. They laugh about waiting for me to die." Willis closed his eyes for a second, a small, human reaction. "I'm sorry, Harold," he said. "You don't deserve that." "I know," I replied simply. "But I can't change them. And I'm done trying." He nodded slowly. "What do you want to do?" That was the simplest question, and the clearest answer. "I want everything, house, savings, life insurance, to go to my brother's grandkids. Caleb and Nia." His eyebrows lifted, but he didn't question it. I continued, "They show up. Not for money. Not for promises. Just to be here. They help with the yard, bring groceries when they can, and talk to me like I matter." Willis opened a folder and began writing. "Are you certain?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "More certain than I've been about anything in years." He asked practical questions about percentages, property transfers, healthcare directives. I answered each one with clarity that surprised even me. Every decision felt like letting go of a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying. When he slid the final set of documents across the table, the new will, the deed transfer instructions, the beneficiary updates, I read each page slowly, making sure there was no misunderstanding. The last page required my signature. My hand didn't shake. It didn't hesitate. It didn't feel revengeful. It felt right. When I finished signing, Willis leaned back and exhaled. Harold, this will change things. I know. You ready for that? I thought of Thanksgiving. The laughter. The jokes. The phones recording. The disrespect served hotter than the turkey. I nodded. Yes, I said softly. I'm ready. He extended his hand again. I'll make sure everything is filed today. Thank you, I said, standing. Before I left, he stopped me. Harold, he said gently, you're not doing this out of anger, are you? I shook my head. No. I'm doing this out of clarity. He smiled, sad but supportive. Then you're doing it for the right reason. I walked out of the office feeling lighter than I had in years. Not happy. Not relieved. Just aligned with the truth. On the bus ride home, I watched people talking, laughing, listening to music, carrying grocery bags and holiday leftovers. Normal life moving on. When I stepped into my house again, nothing looked different. But everything felt different. I hung up my jacket. Placed my notebook back in its drawer. Sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of tea. I whispered into the quiet. Denise, I hope you understand. And deep down, in that quiet place where memory lives, I felt she did. Because protecting your heart, even when it means letting go of your own children, is sometimes the last gift of a lifetime. I didn't call my children right away. Didn't hint at anything. Didn't cold shoulder them, didn't argue, didn't send long messages trying to explain what they already knew and didn't care about. I just let the days pass quietly. The following week, I went about my routine the same way as always. I raked the yard. I talked with Mr. Khan at the corner store. I went to choir practice and sat in the same back row. Nothing about my tone or posture suggested that their futures had shifted beneath their feet. Then, on Monday morning, I sent each of my children the exact same message. We need to meet at Attorney Willis's office on Friday. 10 a.m. It's important. All three responded fast. Funny how quickly they jump when they think money is close by. Marcus replied first. Good. We need to finalize everything. Tanya replied. Finally. I was hoping you'd get this done. Jerome replied. Okay, cool. Whose car are we taking after? We grabbing lunch? Lunch. As if this were a celebration. I didn't answer any of them. Didn't need to. Friday came. I woke early, showered, shaved, put on the same pressed shirt and jacket I wore to the lawyer's office the week before. I looked at myself in the mirror, not for vanity, but for recognition. The man staring back at me wasn't angry. He wasn't smiling either. He just looked sure of himself. I took the bus again. I wanted the time to think, to breathe, to settle my spirit. Because I wasn't walking into a confrontation. I was walking into a revelation. When I arrived, my children were already in the lobby. Marcus stood with his arms crossed, pacing like he was waiting to sign the deed to a new house. Tanya scrolled on her phone, adjusting her hair between glances at the clock. Jerome slouched in the chair, yawning, looking like he hadn't slept since Sunday. Daddy, Tanya said brightly, kissing my cheek. You look nice today. Morning, I said to all of them. My voice was calm. We followed the receptionist down the hall to Willis's office. He stood as we entered. Mr. Mason. Marcus. Ms. Riley. Jerome. Please, have a seat. Everyone settled in. Marcus leaned forward like he was ready for an important briefing. Tanya smiled politely, already imagining the future she thought was coming. Jerome stretched his legs, smirking like this was some formality before a payout. Willis began with professionalism. Your father asked you all here today to review and confirm the final updates to his estate plan. Marcus nodded quickly. Great. We've been telling him for months to take care of it. Tanya added, yes, it'll give everyone peace of mind. Jerome jumped in, so, how does this work? We sign something? Willis paused for a moment, then looked at me. I nodded once. He pulled out a folder, thicker than most, and placed it gently on the table. These, he said, are the completed documents your father signed last week, his updated will, property transfer directives, and beneficiary assignments. Marcus straightened up. Tanya leaned in. Jerome cracked his knuckles. Willis continued, your father is of completely sound mind and made these decisions with full clarity and without outside pressure. I watched each of my children absorb that line differently. Marcus frowned slightly. Tanya blinked as if confused. Jerome shrugged like he didn't care about the setup, just the punchline. Then Willis opened the folder. He lifted the top document, cleared his throat, and read. All assets, properties, accounts, and possessions belonging to Harold Mason are hereby left to Caleb Johnson and Nia Johnson. He said it plainly. Professionally. Without emotion. But the silence that followed was like a sudden drop in air pressure. Marcus's jaw tightened. His leg bounced like it was trying to outrun the words. Tanya stared at the document, blinking hard as if the ink might rearrange itself if she looked long enough. Jerome sat up, hands falling from the back of his head where he'd been lounging, his face scrunching up in disbelief. What? Marcus finally said, voice strained. I don't think we heard you correctly, Tanya added. Jerome let out a short laugh, dry and confused. Nah, no way. Read it again. Willis stayed composed. Your father has left everything to Caleb and Nia Johnson, his late brother's grandchildren. Tanya's voice shot up before she could control it. What about us? I stayed quiet. I wanted their reactions unfiltered. Raw. Honest. Marcus shook his head, trying to regain control. Hold on. That doesn't make sense. We're his children. His actual children. Willis calmly folded his hands. Your father made this choice intentionally and with full understanding. Jerome leaned toward me, eyebrows furrowed. Dad, what is this? Some kind of mistake? I looked at all three of them slowly. No anger. No bitterness. Just truth. No, I said quietly. No mistake. Tanya's face reddened. Why them? Why would you leave everything to? I held up a hand. She stopped mid-sentence. I'll explain, I said. The room went still. Even the building seemed to stop breathing. I raised you, I began slowly. Fed you. Clothed you. Worked double shifts so you could have a better life. Drove a bus through storms and long nights just to make sure you had what you needed. Their eyes shifted, some guilt, some irritation, some disbelief. But somewhere along the way, I continued, you stopped seeing me. You stopped seeing the man who raised you. Instead, you saw what I own. Marcus swallowed. Tanya looked down. Jerome shook his head, muttering something under his breath. I went on, my voice steady. I heard you talking. All of you. About my house. My money. My health. My age. You joked about flipping the place. You joked about how long I'd last. You called me old. Outdated. Useless. Tanya covered her mouth. Marcus's eyes widened with realization. Jerome looked away. You treated my life like a countdown, I said. Like all I'm good for now is what I leave behind. I let the silence do the rest. I wanted them to feel the weight, not to punish them, but so they'd understand. Caleb and Nia, I said, they don't ask me for anything. They don't laugh at me. They don't call only when they need something. They come by to see me. To help. To talk. They respect me as a man. They care about me while I'm alive. Marcus tried to speak, but I continued. I'm not rewarding them. I'm honoring them. Then I leaned back, hands folded. It's my name on the deed. It's my life's work in those papers. And I choose to leave it to the ones who showed me love without conditions. The room grew heavy with realization. The kind that doesn't fade quickly. Tanya was crying. Jerome was rubbing his temples. Marcus stared at the table, his face colorless. But none of them said they were sorry. Not one. Not then. Not in that moment. And that told me everything. Willis closed the folder gently. That concludes the legal review, he said. There is nothing to dispute. My children stood slowly, as if their bodies weighed twice as much as before. I walked to the door first, opened it, and stepped aside. I didn't raise my voice. Didn't look angry. Didn't explain further. I just said quietly, "When you're ready to talk to me like I'm your father again, you know where my home is." Not a single one of them followed me out. The days after the lawyers' meeting moved slowly, like the world had shifted into a quieter gear. Not heavy. Not painful. Just still. A stillness I hadn't felt in years. My phone didn't ring. No texts. No missed calls. The same 3 children who used to call me only when they needed something suddenly went silent when they learned there was nothing left to take. And that silence told its own truth. Not one of them asked if I was okay. Not one of them showed up. Not one of them said, "Daddy, can we talk?" And I think a younger version of me would have broken under that. Would have blamed himself. Would have begged for reconciliation, hoping to fix a wound they didn't even acknowledge. But the man I was now, the man who walked out of that lawyer's office with his spine straight and his breath steady, he felt something different. Freedom. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that settles on your shoulders like a blanket after a long day. I didn't tell anyone what happened. Not the choir. Not the neighbors. Not even Aunt Laverne. Not because I was hiding anything, but because the truth didn't feel like something to parade around. It felt like something to live through, one slow day at a time. The first week, I kept to my routine. Morning coffee. Quiet walks. A visit to the corner store. Church on Sunday. Nothing about my schedule changed, but something inside me had been rearranged neatly, like someone had finally put everything in the right drawer. One afternoon, as I raked the yard, I heard a familiar voice. "Uncle Harold? You need help with that?" It was Caleb. Bike leaning against the curb, backpack still on. I handed him the extra rake without a word. He didn't ask questions. He didn't treat me fragile. He just worked beside me, cutting through the pile of leaves with the same steady rhythm I'd spent years finding peace in. After a while, he asked gently, "You okay?" I nodded. More truthfully than I'd nodded in a long time. When we finished, we sat on the porch steps, looking out at the street. The sun was dipping low, turning everything gold. Caleb rested his arms on his knees. "Nia made extra dinner," he said. "She said to bring you some if you wanted." I smiled, small, but real. "I'd like that." He grinned like he'd been waiting for me to say it. Moments like that, simple, unforced, were worth more than any inheritance I could have handed down to people who saw me as nothing more than a dwindling source of value. A few days later, Nia came over after school. She brought me peach cobbler, still warm, wrapped in foil, and sat at the kitchen table chatting about her choir recital, school projects, college applications. She didn't talk down to me or rush the conversation. She made space for me to exist in her world. When she was leaving, she gave me a soft hug and said, "You know, you're a big part of our family, right? Not just 'cause you're Grandpa's brother. 'Cause you're you." That stayed with me long after she pulled out of the driveway. It wasn't the words. It was the sincerity. The kind that can't be faked. The kind that doesn't expect anything in return. As the weeks passed, the house felt different. Not fuller, no. Just lighter. I found myself cooking again, real meals, not just sandwiches or reheated leftovers. I played old records Denise loved, letting them drift through the rooms as I swept or dusted. I took longer walks, slower ones, the kind where you see things you used to rush past. I wasn't grieving what I'd lost. I was accepting what I'd gained. One Saturday morning, while trimming the hedges, I saw Tanya's car slow down in front of the house. She looked at me through the window, eyes red, like she'd been crying. For a second, I thought she might stop. Say something. Step onto the porch and tell me she understood, even a little. But she didn't. She drove off. A month later, Marcus sent a long text. Apologizing, but only in the way people apologize when they still think they're right. Jerome sent nothing. Not even silence with intention. Just absence. And you know what? I didn't chase any of it. Because healing doesn't mean running back into the fire once you've escaped the burn. It means standing still long enough for the skin to regrow. By Christmas, Caleb and Nia had unofficially adopted me into their routines. They invited me to school events, asked for advice, brought me leftovers, called just to check in, shared jokes at the dinner table that reminded me of the warmth I used to believe I'd never feel again. On Christmas Eve, after their mother insisted I stay for dinner, Nia asked if I wanted to help hang ornaments. I smiled and nodded. As we placed the last ornament, a simple wooden one shaped like a star, she said, "You make the house feel safe." And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I didn't expect. I felt needed, not for what I could give, but for who I still was. That's a different kind of inheritance. One that doesn't fade. One that doesn't depend on bank accounts or property lines. One that grows where respect lives. I wasn't the same man I was before that Thanksgiving. But I wasn't broken either. Just quieter. Clearer. More grounded in what mattered. Some families are born. Some families are built. And some families are revealed to you only when everything else falls away. I've lived a long life. Long enough to know that blood can bind people together. But it can't force them to treat you right. And sometimes, the deepest wounds don't come from strangers. They come from the people who once held your hand crossing the street. The people you tucked in at night. The people you would have given your last dollar for without thinking twice. My children didn't become cruel overnight. It happened slowly. Years of distance. Years of excuses. Years of quiet entitlement growing like weeds in a garden I kept trying to water. But disrespect. That doesn't stay hidden forever. It always shows itself. At the dinner table. In a careless conversation. In a group chat they didn't mean for you to read. And laughter that wasn't joking. Just covered in the thin paint of it. And here's the truth I want you to hear, wherever you're watching from. You don't owe your peace to people who treat you like a burden. You don't owe your life's work to people who see you as a cash out. And you don't owe your love to people who only remember you when they want something. I didn't cut my children out to punish them. I cut them out to protect myself. To protect the part of me that still knows what dignity feels like. To protect what's left of a heart that has already given more than its share. And in that space, that quiet space where their voices no longer drown out my own, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Respect. Real respect. Not from where I expected, but from where it was earned. So let me leave you with a question today. If the people closest to you laughed at your worth, would you still leave them everything you built? Tell me in the comments. And if my story spoke to something you felt, subscribe, because I've lived a life full of lessons. And I've still got truth left to share.